Welcome. My name is Joe Paprocki. I'm the National Consultant for Faith Formation at Loyola Press, a Jesuit ministry operating out of Chicago. And it's my privilege today to be the host for this webinar called The Homeboy Way, a webinar with CEO Thomas Vozzo. And Thomas has given me permission to call him Tom. And so we're on an informal basis here, but welcome everyone to this webinar. We're going to be chatting with Tom in just a few minutes. I will introduce him and then we'll get underway with our interview with him. We'll talk with Tom for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll do some Q&A. So in the meantime, as we progress through the webinar, feel free to write in any questions, comments, or observations either in the chat or in the Q&A feature. And towards the end of our webinar, we will dive into some Q&A with Tom. Also, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. And so if you have to leave early or your power goes out or you want to send this to someone, or you just can't get enough of Tom and you want to listen to them all over again, you will be receiving a recording of this. So hang in there. Recording will be made available within another day or so. All right, so time for us to jump right in. Let me tell you about Tom Vozzo. Tom has served as the CEO of Homeboy Industries since 2012. Happy 10th anniversary. That's a nice milestone. And Homeboy Industries is the largest and most successful gang rehabilitation and re-entry program in the world. Tom has led the nonprofit organization forward, bringing his business expertise and vision to implement a strategic and mission-driven development plan for the organization. It's resulted in doubling the size of the organization. And this is all after Tom spent 26 years as a successful corporate executive. And after 26 years, he swerved. We're going to get into that in just a second. We're going to ask Tom to explain what he means by that swerve. So now after years after he accepted Father Greg Boyle's invitation, he's still discovering homeboy definitions of winning, value, and even success. And so welcome, Tom. It's great to see you. Thanks for being with us today.
Joe, thanks for having me.
We're excited to talk about your book is wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What I love about it, Tom, is that it's not just, here I'm going to tell a story about myself and you do that, but then you go on to share a vision for leadership, a vision for business, a vision for our country. And you make some rather bold statements in it. And so we're going to spend the next 45 minutes delving into that. Does that sound good with you, Tom?
That sounds great.
Okay. So tell us, Tom, we saw in your intro, the bio that you sent us, you use that word that you swerved after 26 years. Unpack that for us, please. What does that mean that you swerved?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to start. And to say that while in writing the book, it's a little bit of a story about me, but it's mostly a story about Homeboy and about what it's like to work at an organization that is a people-centric human services agency. And so if I can just take a minute to talk about Homeboy Industries, and then I'll get to the swerve for a moment. The Homeboy Industries is a nonprofit organization. We're located here in Los Angeles. See my picture in the background? That's our building. It's right near Chinatown, downtown Los Angeles. Homeboy was founded about 34 years ago by a Jesuit priest, Father Greg Boyle. And the mission we have is that we help gang members leave gang life. And so when people leave the prison system or jail system, and they have this choice, do they want to go back to the gang or get more on the straight and narrow? We're here for them, and they walk through our doors, and we help them transform their lives. And so from early on, when Father Greg was his first stop as a parish priest, Dolores Mission, poorest parish in the whole Archdiocese of Los Angeles, epicenter of gang violence in Los Angeles, he was looking for a way out for these young men and women, and hit upon a simple notion If you kind of employ them where they make enough money for food and shelter, they're not going to go run with the gang for food and shelter. And so that's Homeboy Industries. We help, we started as a jobs program, but then it moved into having our own businesses. But really, we help people change their life around through a whole host of therapies, because all our folks are victims of complex trauma. All right, so that was sort of the setup of what Homeboys is about.
Good.
And for me, I say that in context because I view myself as pretty typical of my father's first generation American. So we grew up, hard work ethic. We were first generation to go to college, came out of college, and I went into the business world. And I realized through my own merit and my own abilities and my own skills, I can kind of go up. And I went very high up in the corporate ladder. That in the bio you mentioned, it's about my last set of businesses. I ran a $2 billion set of businesses. I only say that number for contrast to what Homeboy Industry is when I first showed up, was a $11 million business. But back to the swerve. And so all throughout my life, I love businesses. I view myself as a committed capitalist. I think well-run businesses are good for our society. But in the end of the day, I think the rules of businesses need to change a little bit. That the way that the business construct is set up in the United States here is that you have shareholders, you have employees, you have customers, and if you can kind of keep that in balance, it works. But oftentimes, when push comes to shove, shareholders wins over employees, and so many times in my business career, I saw that rub point, and it didn't make me feel good that we're doing something for the bottom line more so than for the employees. And I think back, and I still remember this vividly today. Back in 2008, remember we had the Great Recession.
Yes.
A little bit different than the recession or the economic troubles we're in today, but back then it was a huge recession. Essentially companies shrunk by 15 to 20%. And the businesses I was running, I was part of a bigger corporation, $13 billion corporation. My businesses were $2 billion. And the businesses I was running, we were right about that. As unemployment went down 10%, our business volume was down 10%. But at the end of the day, my businesses were going to produce $160 million of profit, right? Not revenue, profit, right?
Mm.
And so that was the plan. Now, in that Great Recession that first year, the numbers were only coming in 150 million of profit. So we were missing by $10 million, and we've done a lot of layoffs to get there. And so I thought that was a pretty good result in a Great Recession.
Sure.
I remember, so back in 2008, 2 days before Christmas, chairman of the corporation calls me up and asks me how, end of year projections look. And I told him, and he turned to me and said, "Tom, that's not good enough. We need to get back to our profit plan." And I'm thinking to myself, wow, in the middle of the biggest recession in 50 years, if to still produce that much profit was pretty good. And to get to the extra number, I need to now let more people go, and more employees who were with and I knew in my mind, these are folks who've been with the company 20, 30 years. They worked hard. It wasn't their problem why we had a recession. They just wanted a stable job and to be able to make their lives come true via the job, and their families' lives come true. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, why do we need to do the extra $10 million? And the answer was because we promised Wall Street that we were going to deliver upon our numbers. And so, and I know, look, I'm a smart enough guy. I'm a numbers guy in that sense. Like, I knew that the difference between 150 million and 160 million of profit was not going to change the long-term perspective of a corporation. It was not going to change our shareholder value. It was just bragging rights. And at that moment, that was my epiphany. At that moment, I knew, oh, people took a back seat to profits, which has no great insight, but it's like it didn't sit well with me, and I knew I needed to do something different. So from that moment on, I knew I was going to play it out. The next 4 years, we were owned by private equity. But at the end of that time, about four years, I wanted to swerve and do something different. And I didn't know what that was about, but I kind of knew, I sensed back then, I got to find some way of how can we run businesses that employees are viewed as disposable. We shouldn't view employees as disposable. We should view them as long-term. And that was my goal. I left my corporate job. I love let me just say this. I love my corporate job. It was fun. It was successful. We had a great team. We did well, all those things along the way, but I had a yearning for something else. And And a friend of mine, I'm on the board of Salvation Army of Los Angeles, fellow board member, asked me to come down to Homegirl Cafe and to meet him for lunch. And he knew then I left Aramark, I had time on my hands. And so I kind of knew what he was lining up. He was asking me to get involved. And I'm sitting there having lunch in the Homegirl Cafe, which is right over my shoulder here on this side, and sitting in the booth. And he's telling me about Homeboy. And I never really had heard about Homeboy. But as we're having lunch, I'm observing the folks around me serving us the food and how they're engaged and they're doing good work. They're working hard. They're having fun with each other. They have their heads up. They don't have their heads down. And I say that because back in my corporate life, I made 40 acquisitions of companies in those 8 years. So you get a sense for what companies, you walk the shop floor, you get a sense for employees and whether they have your values and are interested in their work or not, right? Here I'm eating lunch and I'm being served by gang members and felons. And I'm thinking to myself, I would have never hired any of those people back in my corporate days. And yet in the context of a job, these folks are dramatically changing their life around,
Right.
leaving the gang life and moving their life forward. So my opportunity to swerve was to leave that corporate world behind. Victor asked me to get involved. I had been a board member. I didn't want to do board work at that point. I wanted to see if I could roll up my sleeves and put my business skills to use in a different way. And so I started volunteering, and that was and then I thought I would, look, I had all the hubris of a corporate executive. I thought I could come into Homeboy and change. Do this work for a year and help out Father Greg and move on. But here I am, almost celebrating my 10th anniversary, and have as much excitement about Homeboy as I did on that first year. And I just love being part of this community.
Yeah, God had some different ideas for you there. And so it's interesting, Tom, your swerve began even before you met Father Greg, from what you were just saying. And then when you did finally encounter him and get to know him, that swerve continued even deeper. So tell us about meeting Father Greg Boyle and the impact that he has had on you personally. We know he's had an impact on the whole industry there, but on you personally, how did he continue to push you into that swerve and keep you on the road at the same time?
Yeah. There's a couple aspects of this, and so I joined Homeboy, and to me, I did it because I wanted to see if I can help out and help people with my business skills. And so I remember my first meeting with Father Greg, or my first, officially, once I was on board, my first meeting with Father Greg. And, we're sitting down talking, and, I was looking to understand what the organization's about and all. And so I remember he gave me this advice, and I give this advice to everybody who volunteers at Homeboy without even knowing who they are. It's like, he says, look, just come in, be part of the community. We don't need you to do anything specifically. You're not in charge of anything. We're not broken. Just come, be part of the community, and see and you'll find your way, and you'll see how the community influences you. And then I remember talking to Hector Verdugo, one of our leaders, and he was a former homie, grew up through the organization, kind of like a number 2 or number 3 guy in the organization. I remember talking to Hector about what's it like to be here. And Hector turns to me and says, if you come work at Homeboy, we're gonna help you more than you help us, and we're gonna change you more than you change us. And I had the hubris again. I mean, I remember sitting there in my mind saying, "Oh, that's a very nice thing to say," and that's cute, right? And the funny thing is, Hector caught my eyes, and he knew I was thinking, "Oh, that was cute."
Yeah.
He knew I was thinking that, but he also knew he was right. And it is so true that to be welcome in this community of Homeboy, which they just welcome with open arms, and they learn from them. And so you ask what I learned from Father Greg, it's just as Greg writes this in many ways, in many speeches, it's like he encourages us all to move to the people who are on the margins of our society and be in kinship with them, be in relationship with them. Don't go to them and wag your finger, right? And just to be in relationship, and that's what sort of helps them and helps me who moved on the margins. So early on, I recognized I needed to understand more about Homeboy. And Homeboy's got this very interesting thing called council, where every morning a group of the leaders would meet and talk, but not talk about policies and procedures
Right.
or talk about but they would talk about individual people who were struggling the most. And it was almost like this like committee effort to help people. And I remember listening to the issues of, someone not showing up for work for 3 days, or
Hmm.
someone being insubordinate to their supervisor, or someone going through a DV battle along a DV incident along the way. And I remember as I'm sitting there listening, I would think to myself, oh, this is how I would go about it. I would do X, Y, and Z. And
Hmm.
in most half the time, Father Greg and the other leaders would go, not my way, but the opposite, 180 degrees the opposite way. And I would think, well, that's interesting. How did they get to that solution? And the more I would listen and observe and then watch how their solution sort of played out and how it worked, made me think, wow, I got a lot to learn about Homeboy. And it's not typical. You kind of you treat people in a different way.
Yeah, it
I know
sounds to
you,
me
and I,
sounds to me like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. I have a feeling we're not in Kansas
yeah,
anymore.
well, we're not in Kansas. I better go home and talk to my wife. And it's like this is so different. And the common theme of the differences
Hmm.
is about treating the individual, not worrying about setting precedent, not worry about if you do this for Joe today, you got to do this for Tom tomorrow. No, it's you
Yeah.
got to understand what the situation is and how to help people meet people where they're at. Because listen, we're dealing with people who are victims of complex trauma from
Hmm.
a young age. They got jumped into a gang from a young age. They've never really had family support around them. And so you just got to kind of go about it in a much different way that enables them to kind of tap into their own goodness and move their life forward.
Yeah, and so even before you were contemplating or starting to think about how you need to change the rules of the game, you had to change a number of rules for yourself, right? About how you approach leadership, how you approach business, how you approach being a CEO.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just like back to what I was saying. The advice I give to volunteers when they come to Homeboy is listen. There's 1,000 things we do wrong every day. We probably don't answer our phones quick enough. We don't. Maybe
Hmm.
we serve cold cups of coffee. You know, but what we do right every day is the mission of helping people get out of gang life. And you got to be very clear about this is our mission. So if anybody in other organizations, got to be clear about what your mission is, what your mission isn't, and then
Yeah.
make sure you put all your resources to delivering the part of the mission, and not be so wound up over the stuff, people showing up late for meetings, or again, people not answering the phones, or just recognizing that. And particularly insubordination is an interesting aspect here, because
Hmm.
we've worked over time to have a lot of our folks with lived experience become part of our management team. Well, they don't have that complete set of honed managerial talents. And so you have to
Yeah.
expect mistakes along the way. But in the end of the day, you're helping people change their life and moving them forward. So so what I had to do differently, I had to think through that I was not the leader that's just because I'm the top of the hierarchy, they gotta listen to
Hmm.
me, right? I have to sort of value the mission along the way, value the people with lived experience who have more insight than I do about how to help people, but also sort of encourage them that they can do it in a way that's more structured. And so as part is more coach and supporter to get people
Yeah.
to where we want to go.
Yeah, and you said that, when you were meeting and getting to know Father Greg, that he talked about, going out to the people on the margins. And that echoes a line that we hear from Pope Francis quite a bit as well, going out to the peripheries. And so in your book, you write about what you call a forgotten America, that there are many people that have been pushed to the margins, pushed to the peripheries, and that we have this sort of a dual citizenship almost, setup of, a certain type of America and then a forgotten America. So tell us more about your concept of a forgotten America and how we need to respond to this.
Yeah. So that's a big aspect of why I wrote the book. Look, I first thought I was writing the book to be like a business book that if I was ever to go back into the for-profit world, which lessons would I bring back to the for-profit world? And there's plenty of those lessons in there. But then it's like I love my time at Homeboy. I've learned so much, and we'll talk about my own spiritual path that I found. But there's a part of that being a homeboy makes me angry. It makes me angry that we still have people in our society that are demonized and forgotten and considered disposable. And I recognize that there's this forgotten America. There's the America you and I may live in, Joe, but then there's America that the clients of Homeboy have to deal with, the poor, the working poor, and how hard it is for them to move their life forward in a positive way. Listen, the poverty rate in America has been the same for 45 years. I'm saying we have to pick up our heads and do something different. And the something different is the Homeboy way of how you treat people. How do you get people to be having no job, no experience, no support system around them, and moving them forward? Because in the forgotten America, the healthcare is different, dental care is different, access to food is different, housing is different. Coming out with massive debt out of the prison system is different. And so, like, we have this notion that, like, if someone just works harder, they should be able to get by in our society. No, the American dream is not the American dream we think about that exists for the people who are poor. It's just different. And we as a society need to recognize these differences and then kind of do more and over invest along the way. Let me give you an example. It combines these
Sure.
two things of the forgotten America and how business is doing, how doing business with people that we serve
Mhm.
doing differently. So we have our Homeboy bakery, and it's artisan made bread. And by the way, there's nothing better, look, LA County has over 200 different gangs, right? And so there's nothing better than have rival gang members sitting in the bakery on the bread table, rolling dough,
Mm.
shoulder to shoulder with their enemy. Because in the end, that's
Wow.
what breaks down those barriers, and then people see each other as people, not as
Sure.
rival gang. So in our Homeboy bakery, we also have farmers markets. We go to 26 farmers markets around the county. It's also good for send our guys out there, and they're selling the bread and interacting with the public. Like within my first 6 months of being a Homeboy, I remember I was walking through the bakery, and I heard one of our farmers market guys say that the manager, George, said he's taking the weekend off. He needs to have the weekend off. He was asking the manager if he could take the weekend off. And so, I'm trying to be friendly. So I go up to George afterwards, say, hey, what are you going to do over the weekend? Right. Kind of like this light lib way of saying it.
Yeah.
And George says to me, well, I'm going to report in. And I had a quizzical look. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm reporting to county jail because he's still making restitution on his, he came out of prison, owed money, not just for the crime, but owes money for court costs, probation costs. I mean, it's crazy what our society throws on top of people leaving the jail system, how much money they owe. But at that time in LA, if you can report in for 3 days to county jail and earn off the amount of money you owe. And so I walk away from that dialogue with her and wow, that was a very responsible thing for him to do. How many people would actually report into jail to cut their debt by $2,000? Not many. How many people would just go borrow at a high rate? A lot of people go back to their gang homies and borrow the money. But George wanted to do it the right way, and so he's going to report in. And so the whole weekend of that happening, I was been thinking about George. How's that time in the jail working for him? Following Tuesday, I see George again, ask him how to go. And he looks at me. I can see the stress on his face. He said, well, something happened. And so he tells me that, George has custody of his 2 children. They were 10 and 8, right? And so here's a guy leaving the gang life, has no support system around, no family around, was able to get custody of his children. So he's trying to do right by his children. And the person who's going to watch his children for the weekend at the last minute couldn't make it. And so George still had to report into jail. And so he left his children at home the whole weekend. So the whole weekend while he was in jail, he was fretting about what's happening to his kids. Now, I'll get to fast forward the story. The kids turned out fine. They're fine. They were able to get through it. But you can imagine the stress on George. So here's a couple of things. One is part of that story. It's unbelievable what the poor, the working poor, the demonized poor have to get through in our society just to do things the right way. Number one.
Yeah.
Number two is the rest of us, how it instinctively we judge. We think about it. We keep thinking, well, no, George, that was not a good choice to leave your kids at home. Our folks are left with impossible choices each and every day, whether they go report to jail, cut down the debt, whether they have food on their table and money for diapers, whether they can actually pay the cash to have their teeth fixed or not. massive choices they got to affect. And so what I've learned early on at Homeboy through Greg and the team, not to judge people, because you can't put yourself in that situation. You have no context to it. But also recognizing the other lesson is, my point is to the business community out there, we can do a better job of helping, not having as much people in poverty. But the higher people who are the working poor, you need to have a better support system around so that a guy like George can pay off his debts and not have to take 3 days off to make that happen. So I know it's a long story there, but in that one little story is like 3 big elements of that.
Yeah, it's a powerful story. And I found personally, I found that part of the book to be one of the most powerful when you talk about this notion of a forgotten America. And I like the way you phrase that too, because forgotten puts the onus on us, on many of us, to say, okay, how, in what ways have I forgotten people? In what ways am I not paying attention to people? And I think so much of, the story, the gospel story of the rich man and Lazarus, who sat at his table waiting for the crumbs to fall. And so many people would look at that and say, well, what did this guy do wrong? He's just minding his own business, eating his own meal. But he didn't notice that there was a forgotten person at his feet. So very powerful part of the book, Tom. And you've also then gone on in the book to talk about how many people in this forgotten America have taught you many lessons. That you have seen many values and actions expressed that just made your eyes kind of pop. That wow. And one of the lessons that you said is that you've really learned a lot about not only generosity but gratitude. Tell us a little bit about these lessons learned from the homies, and in particular, it seemed like you were very much emphasizing this notion of generosity and gratitude.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I've learned so much from Father Greg and all, but as he would say as well, he's learned so much from our homies, from folks who were in our program. And look, I invite everybody on this listening to come visit us at Homeboy. We take in a lot of visitors each year, each day, and we want people to feel the environment we're in, because you walk through our doors and it's a very upbeat, energetic environment where we see folks laughing and crying. And I say that because it's very authentic, and that's what I learned from our folks. They have no airs. They don't have the pretenses that us middle class and wealthy people have along the way. They're not like climbing over each other to move ahead in life, and climbing up that corporate ladder. Now, they all want more money for sure, because it's hard being poor in our society. But I've learned that they're authentic, they're real, genuine. There's belly laughter in how they treat each other. And they're generous. I mean, a number of times I've seen people, homies, pull the last $5 out of their pocket to give to somebody who doesn't have it. I mentioned one of our senior leaders. We go out to lunch here locally, and it took me a while to see this, but I would take him out to lunch, and he'd only always eat half his lunch. And on the way back, he would take a to-go bag, and on the way back, he would then hand that half of lunch to a homeless person on the street, or back to one of the homies that he knew was struggling to pay for food.
Yeah.
And it's like, I look at that and think, oh, I could have done the same thing, but I didn't have that instinct. And I start wondering, why didn't I have that instinct? And it's like, again, it's like, there's a little bit of me in the book, but it's like, I kind of view like, I'm like every type of person. Like, not many of us have that instinct. And in our community is so grateful, and they're very generous with each other. They're open-hearted, and to whoever you are, and in the book, I have a couple quotes. Gerald Fagan, the Jesuit, wrote a book, Putting on the Heart of Christ. And I have a couple quotes. I want to read one to you. Gratitude is the moment within the human heart that goes beyond the gift to the giver. I can't tell you how many times I've witnessed that with our folks, and seeing how they interact with each other, and someone giving them a cup of coffee or extra money, or just being with them. Is this, you can just see that gratitude come back and forth. And so I've learned that in this community, that because it's such a struggle, there's a shared aspect of their challenge. It's a much more of a communal effort, and people are real, and I just, there's so much to say and see about Homeboy, but to have that feeling, that's so special. And I'm glad I'm part of this community.
And so you mentioned someone told you before that you were going to learn more and be helped more by the people you're serving than you're going to be helping them. And that seems to always be a lesson. I know when I became a teacher, people told me that you're going to learn more as a teacher from your students than you're going to teach them. And so lots of lessons learned from the homies that you share in your book. And, I think what you talk about there, the sense of generosity and just giving and the sense of appreciating life as a gift, that's something that we can just take for granted. And I remember when I was in college, my best friend and I took a required theology course, and a Jesuit priest who was from Italy had a very heavy Italian accent. One time he just blurted out, he said, "Life is a gift. Life is a gift." And me and my friend thought that was so funny. We made fun of that. And now here we are 40, 50 years later, when we see each other, we say, "Joe, life is a gift." And,
Yeah.
so tough lesson learned. It shouldn't take us that long to
No,
learn those lessons, but sometimes it does. And sometimes we learn those lessons the hard way.
that's right. And listen, and particularly for a guy like me who came out of the business world, a hard charging corporate executive, you get all that extra hard armor on you, and so
Yeah.
you don't let stuff in, you don't let the emotion in, and you come to Homeboy, and I learned to shed and shed that armor, right?
Yeah.
And life is a gift, and being around other folks who are generous is a gift, without a doubt.
You
Listen, I
talk in
also.
your, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, you go.
All right, I was going to say, you talk in your book about how we need to develop workplaces that allow that type of feeling to happen, where we recognize that life is a gift and working is a gift, and that it's not just about the profit and the bottom line. And so in Homeboy Industries, you have many workplaces. The bread you mentioned that's baked. I love this picture. I want to get my hands on that loaf of bread. It's
Yeah.
just incredible. And so you talk about, you invite people to imagine. Imagine a society that collectively pursues and reaches the goal of having thriving workplaces. And you talk about meritocracy. So tell us, in your mind, what creates a thriving workplace?
Yeah, it's one where it's like, look, in the end of the day, people want to find self-worth in what they do, and their job is clearly a lot of what they're about. And so it's being supported, seeing that there's this aspect of quality job where people get paid a decent wage with benefits, upward mobility, consistent hours, but it's also feeling valued and a thriving workplace, finding one's own self-worth. And so we bypass a merit-based evaluation system, right? We really think about, are people following our mission? Do they believe in the mission? Are they walking that talk? And so, yeah, for folks in the business world out there, I'm saying, meritocracy works in many cases, but for our population, for the working poor, meritocracy doesn't work. Because what follows a meritocracy is this notion of measurement, and you can't measure someone's self-worth, right? And people who have all these struggles in life, they, the rest of our society wags our finger at them and says, just work harder and you can measure
Right.
up. No, you can't measure up. Martin Luther King has a statement about, I'm going to paraphrase it, but essentially, it's hard to say someone should pull themselves up by the bootstraps when they don't have boots along the way. And so we have to think about our systems in our workplace. Let's not have it such a merit-based scoring system along the way. But individual centric, people centric, be more encouraging along the way. Let me add this other thing. And I'm not sure if this one really works, but what I have found at Homeboy is it allowed me to talk about my own faith in God. And I know back in the corporate world, it is forbidden to kind of, so you can
Sure.
get even close to your own spirituality. But allowing people to kind of individually express their feelings makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting how many people who come into the workplace just sort of buy into the rules, as you mentioned before. We're going to get back to those a little bit later on about how we need to break some of those. But we buy into this notion of competition
Mhm.
right away and how I can do better than my coworkers. And I remember one time, not too long ago, I have a core of speakers that I recruit and that work for us at Loyola Press. And one of them has really, risen, become a star in her own right. And someone asked me, Joe, how do you feel about that? Sort of being eclipsed. And I said, I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely
Right.
thrilled, to have someone that, came up through the ranks and then just their stars shone brightly. And, so for us to be able to delight in the successes of others as opposed to approaching it with competition that, well, okay, well, if she or he did this, then I need to, respond.
Yeah, and without that, but a lot of that's about and is we're going to be competitive with others. Look, listen, if we're comfortable in our own skin and believe in who we are and
Mhm.
love ourselves, we can be more open and spacious with others, right? And so
Yeah,
you kind of this whole judging thing. Look, I was a hard charging CEO that was judging everything, right?
yeah,
I've come to find not to judge. And when you stop judging, you stop competing and you stop kind of evaluating yourself versus the others, and you can learn more about yourself
yeah.
and, and you have a better relationship with others.
Absolutely. And you also talk in your book about how you mentioned just a few minutes ago that, in your previous world, you talk about God was, forbidden. And but you refer to, and I'll just read the quote from the book, being around Homeboy, you can't avoid having its spirituality soaked approach. I love that phrase. To people affect your view on life. Tell us what you mean by spirituality soaked approach to people.
Yeah. Let me first say, you asked me early on what I learned from Greg, and I went into more of the nuance. But the number one thing I've learned from Greg and the team is that God is too busy loving us to judge us,
Hmm.
right? And so, and look, Homeboy is Father Gray's our founder, still with us. We have our thought of the day, and we end by a prayer. But that's it from in terms of like a religious thing and spiritual thing. And whoever does the prayer can pray to whatever God they want and whichever religion they want along the way.
Sure.
But and it's very, it's authentic and all. But what I've noticed when I was and then when you're at Homeboy a little bit more time, you can kind of see how people are changing their life right in front of your eyes, right? And I noticed the common denominators, they're changing their life because they found their own spirituality, they found their own faith in God. They finally understood that God loves them, and they finally understood that there's God-given goodness in them, and that they're not bad people. That's what is sort of allows the transformation that we talk about. And so the whole organization is soaked in that spirituality of God loving us, us loving ourselves in each other, which you don't get very often anywhere else. And listen, so we all can do that. And what makes Homeboy such a special place, and I kind of say it this way, and a bit ham-fisted in that, if anyone's ever struggling, trying to find God or see if God exists, God, just walk into Homeboy and this you can see God's hand at work each and every day. And that is what I kind of hold on to and recognize to try to open my heart and my eyes to see, learn more about that, which kind of has pushed me on my own spiritual journey. But that's something that's pretty special, and it's only the type of people we serve that we're finding that, and it's the poor or back in our own faith here, right? It's as Jesus tells us, it's to go with the poor, be on the margins. They're credible guides to to God and spirituality.
And your approach to spirituality, as you talk about it in the book, is not simply, a navel gazing, looking at myself, feel good experience, but there's a very social aspect to spirituality that translates into action. And,
Mhm.
and you talk about, needing to change the world and change the way we do things. And you even propose something that you call a new slice. You'd like to define a new slice of capitalism. And so, in other words, you want to translate that spirituality into a new way of doing things. So tell us what you mean by
Yeah,
economic equality capitalism.
yeah, sure. And I like to set it up this way. Without a doubt, so learn about my own, I follow my own faith. People are in their own spiritual path along the way. And, I've been learning from the Jesuits of late, and my own words of call, this concept of call of the king. It's believing in your faith, having your faith, but it's not just a thought process. It's about, there's action. You need action along the way. And to me, it's actions about shining a light that we should not allow to have our same poverty rate in America. We should not allow that forgotten America to exist. And I'm saying the action is we can do better. And so let's take, and since I have a lot of business background, let's take some rules and ways of going about it out of the business community. So economic equality capitalism is, let's invest in people. So people build, private equity, venture capital companies, they bring money together, capital, and they deploy capital money to businesses so that those businesses can grow and then create profits and have the return
Right.
on investment. I'm saying, yeah, let's do all that. Let's invest in businesses. Let's allow them to grow. But the metric is how many quality jobs and how many lives we're employing and improving along the way. There's a little bit of return on investment, but the majority is how many quality jobs we're doing. So let's take that proven model that works in our business community of taking people's money, investing it, but let's invest it to help businesses prosper and have more jobs for more people. Because really, my way of thinking, the only way out of this poverty side rate is to employ more people into good jobs. And so let's put a metric on how many good jobs we create. And so it's really being willing to invest money to allow that to happen is what I'm trying to encourage the business community to get to.
And that's a perfect segue into the last part of your book, in which you talk about what are some of the other rules that we need to break. You actually have 55 of them. I don't think we're going to have enough time, Tom, to go into all 55. But I've asked you to think of a few. You've already touched on a few of them as you've gone along, but you have this passion for saying that we need to break some of the rules that are just drilled into us when it comes to business and how we interact with each other. So give us a few examples of some rules we need to break, Tom.
Yeah. So as to be like a little teaser, number 14.
Yeah, we're all good.
Okay. So number 4, it's like, these are the rules to break. So like the rule is we should always strive for certainty. And then I'm saying, let's break that rule. Because I was the type of guy who all throughout my career, I was making these moves, these chess moves. I was figuring out where I was going to do because I had certainty where I was going. Coming to Homeboy was a clear leap of faith, and it worked out. So if a hard charging guy could figure out, at some point you got to have a little bit more faith and be willing to live in the murkiness and the gray area of life, it has its rewards. I want to get them all 4 in here. Number 37. We haven't talked much about this. Advancement systems should be colorblind and color neutral. I'm saying break that rule. In corporate America, the way people think, it's about being colorblind and color neutral. And I'm saying working with Homeboy Industries is 80% organization, 80% people of color, helping people of color who have been poor along the way. You have to overinvest in the people in that team that bring them up. If we're going to bring more diversity into higher levels of, let's call it the business world or government world, you have to start from the bottom. You have to create more jobs. You have to then invest in them as leaders. So you can't just be colorblind and color neutral. You have to actually bias it the other way to allow more folks more opportunities along the way. Number 44, we a little bit talked about a merit-driven culture is good for everyone. I'm saying no, doesn't work for the poor. And the last one, number 54, my gift is not of the help people type. And I'm saying, no, let's get rid of that notion. I always thought, I got lucky. I got the Homeboy and they needed somebody with some business skills who can by doing that can help people. But I've come to learn, I know it sounds cliche, but I've come to learn for all of us, we have the capacity just to move to the margins of being in relation with people there and just being friendly. We all have the capacity to be friendly. By doing that, massively changes people's perspective in their lives. And that is of the help that people type. So don't think just because you're an accountant or a business guy, you can't go help people on the margins of our society.
Tom, that's great. You did give us a little tease there of 4 of the 55 rules that need to be broken. And again, folks, when you get the book, and you got to get the book, we'll show you how at the end. It's a very powerful part of the book that it leads to change, saying there's how are we going to be different? And Tom gives us a number of ways. And so we thank you for that, Tom, and thank you for sharing with us. So we're not going to let you go yet, because we have some time for Q&A. And so folks, I know a few of you have already gone into the chat and the Q&A, and there are a few questions and comments waiting there for us in a moment. My friend and colleague Denise Gorse is going to pick out a couple of those and share them with us, because I've been too glued to listening to you, Tom, to go in and check the chat myself. That's why we have Denise behind the curtain here. But I wanted to just remind people once again, if you have a question for Tom, go into the chat right now, or go into the Q&A and write. You could either put a comment or a question to put in there. In the meantime, excuse me, I also wanted to show this beautiful Homeboy Industries tie that I'm wearing today. A friend of mine, colleague, went out to LA last week for a celebration of the Homeboy Way book by our guest today. And it was, Tom, we're just so thrilled about it. She had to bring me back a tie to wear. And so I'm happy to wear that. And that's part of how you sustain at Homeboy Industries.
You didn't bring you any of our baked goods, any of our Homeboy bread,
no.
the cookies, huh?
I'm going to have to go out there to get the baked goods next time I'm in LA for sure. So, well, let's go ahead to the Q&A, and Denise is scouring through. Denise, have you found something that you'd like to throw at Tom for him to respond to?
Oh, yes, we have a number of questions coming in here. I think one of the questions that we got a few times is just, is there anything else similar to Homeboy in other areas of the United States doing this sort of work?
Yeah. Like I was inviting everybody to come visit us. Over the years, we've had a lot of organizations come and tour our facilities, and we're open source. We're willing to share what we have. And so 5 or 6 years ago, Father Greg and I were chatting. And Greg wanted to create his Homeboy network. And so here we have it sounds hierarchical, but we have a global Homeboy network, right? Where there actually are 150 organizations from around the country in the world who follow us. That's 42 states and 7 countries who take our model and customize it for their local area. And so, in that way, I say, Father Grace created this movement of like-minded organizations that are there to help people on the margins of our society. And so that's been pretty good. So probably in many of your communities where people are from, there's probably a Homeboy Network participant there.
Okay, great. What else, Denise?
Sterling asks, what influence does education and experience in corporate America have on your ability to connect in very human ways with our brothers and sisters?
Well, yeah, let me answer this way. Listen, just because there's education and there's experience doesn't mean, just because of education and hierarchy doesn't mean those people are qualified for all the jobs. And so here we're an organization that, again, over half of our management team are people with experience, which means very little formal education along the way, but they're very intuitive leaders and they're good at those skills. And so in a people business, you have to have sort of that EQ, the emotional quotient, to sort of understand people. And so even in for-profit world, in a people organization, you end up having leaders that are good with other people. So those skills all translate over. But if the spirit of the question was, you don't need education to kind of do well in this type of business, that's definitely true.
Thank you. Denise, I'm sure we have time for a couple more questions.
And we have them coming in.
Good.
Here's a practical fact one. How many people have gone through the Homeboy program?
And before the pandemic, we had about 8,000 people come through our doors each year. We have 2 types of clients. We have a community client, or what we call our paid program. Now, I should have said this at the beginning. folks are looking at a gang life and they come into our paid program, we are paying them to come in every day, work on themselves, see their therapist, get their tattoos removed, get their about education. Only 40% have a high school education. We have actually community college, and then a little bit they sweep floors and wash windows, and then eventually work in our businesses. So we pay people. So 8,000 people a year. That's been that way for the last 10 years. And even in this pandemic, it's probably more folks. We've been a sanctuary. We never closed our doors in the pandemic. We were really the only safe spot that someone has in their life, because otherwise they're in their neighborhood and it's oftentimes violent.
What's next,
Chris,
Denise?
Chris asks, as a result of your experiences at Homeboy, what would you say is the most significant aspect of transformation you've undergone in regards to how you live your life or relate to other people?
Yeah, I'm so thankful to being a homeboy. It's about, I've talked about my own spiritual journey, my path I've been on, and this concept of love and God loving us, and that everyone is good. There's no bad, there are no bad people. You don't label them that way. And so once in your mind, once for me, it's like a switch that was flipped. Once I recognized there's good in everybody, and not to be judging everybody, that when that behavior comes along, so if there's insubordination happening and someone's not getting their job done, it's not about disrespecting me. It's not about that person not wanting to do a good job. I now know I got to get underneath what's all that and help them in a different way if I'm going to enable them to be a better worker or leader or participant in our program. So it's that recognition that it's a flip of a switch, that there's goodness in everybody, and people don't try to be bad. They don't try to have bad behavior. Just it happens because of a whole bunch of other stressors in their life.
Next question, Denise.
What kind of training do managers or corporate leaders need to ready them to break out of these old rules and old expectations?
Yeah, I think it's just being willing to, seeing real life examples how it works, and seeing, maybe even hearing some of the stories from the homie perspective. But a lot of this change I'm talking about has to happen from the top down, because if the top leadership of a company does not embrace treating the person as an individual, not worry about setting precedent, does not embrace finding, driving for self-worth in a job, then the lower level managers don't know the rules of the game that they got to live within to be successful. So this really is a top-down approach in my mind.
Let me ask a question here, and then I'll let Denise look for another one or two. It occurred to me, Tom, while you were speaking, that the lessons learned and the philosophy that you have learned through Homeboy Industries should be taught at business schools, on college, Catholic universities, Catholic colleges, and so on. Are you getting invited to speak at Catholic university business schools about this?
Well, I want to say yes and no. Hopefully with this book, more invitations are coming. Certainly in the Los Angeles area, we've been invited by the university. A lot of universities these days have this social entrepreneurial track, and we run social enterprise businesses. We sort of run and we help, and we go and lecture or share our experiences. But it's something that we would like to do more of. Like Father Greg's our founder leader. It's like part of his mission is shining a light on the goodness of people and shining a light on Homeboy and tell them this Homeboy story as well. And so as many opportunities that we can have to go out there and talk about Homeboy, we're willing to take them, because I think it helps everybody in our society.
Absolutely. So any folks in our audience that are connected with any Catholic or Christian colleges, universities, with business schools, get the word out that they should be inviting Homeboy Industries to come and talk about breaking the rules. I think we have time for another question, Denise, and then we're going to wrap up.
Okay, I think this is probably a good one to end the Q&A with. Kathleen wants to know, what are the next frontiers for Homeboy Industries?
Yeah. That's one thing that I've kind of had the urge not to ask that question. That's like to me, that's like my business executive guy. And Father Greg looks at me and rolls his eyes. That it's about helping the person. It's all about helping the person in front of us today. That being said, and that's number one. Number two is so many people need our help. 15 people interview each week to become part of our program, paid program. We can only take one or two because our resources and space. So our board's been encouraging. We want us to double the size. Look, when I started, we were $11 million organization. Now we're at 30 million. And I quickly say we raised 30 million, we spend 30 million. Point is, we want to double the size. We also are, the one service we don't provide under the reentry category is housing. So we have a city lot just south of us. We're trying to get the city to deed that over to us so we can build transitional housing. And the other part, we want to grow more, want to incubate and grow more social enterprises. So if we can kind of keep employing our folks, pay them a living wage, get them to be part of management and let them prosper as well. So there's a lot of things in there we want to do, but fundamentally help the guy and the woman who's in front of us today.
Great, Tom. And Denise, thank you for bringing the questions to us. I'm sure there's more, and maybe we'll find a way of getting those to Tom. But Tom, I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent together. Congratulations on not just the book, but the amazing work that you and Father Greg and all the folks at Homeboy Industries are doing. It's much needed work and much appreciated by those of us who are becoming aware of it. So thanks and many abundant blessings on your future work at Homeboy Industries.
Well, thank you. As you can tell, I love the organization. Come visit us. It's a great place.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you to everyone for joining us in this webinar. Let's talk about how you can get the book. It's a must read. It's such a great read and so many lessons in it. You can get it at Loyola Press. Go to store.loyolapress.com. You can call 800-621-1008, where you, during business hours, you will talk to a real human being about how to get that book. There's also a QR code on the screen in front of you right now. You can hold your phone up in front of that, put it on the camera setting, and it will take you right to the book. So you'll be able to purchase it that way. And once again, just to let you know, a recording will be available soon at ignatianspirituality.com. So keep Homeboy Industries in your prayers, folks. We wish the best to Father Greg and to Tom, and thank you all for joining us. Until next time, this is Joe Paprocki from Loyola Press. God bless.